How's everyone doing today? My name is Coach Wilson, and I'm here for episode 15 of Win Daily. What I talk about on this podcast is the business of sport, physical fitness, and winning in all facets of life. As I said on the intro, my name is Coach Wilson, and where I wear many hats, I put coach above all else. And what that allows me to do is put my skill set, whether it be administrative skills, managing people, developing strategies, guiding people to developing a routine, then holding them accountable so that they can actually execute it. And so in being a coach, I would say that I'm a jack of all trades, but a leader and an educator above all. And so I wanted to dive into a project, and it holds near and dear to my heart because I'd always been a historian, not just of football, but of sport. And in studying the game and then looking at big picture, wanting to know strategy so much, strategy and processes, I got into studying leaders. And so that passion really evolved. But sport is my origins. And I love studying some of the greatest coaches of all time because you see that they're such unique people. And sports are really, they're a domain, and what these coaches are teachers, and they use their respective sport as their class subject to really guide people through life. And so what I went through was a breakdown of the categories that I would use to qualify a coach as elite, and then how would I grade the top 10 greatest coaches of all time. And now this was a very difficult process. It took me the course of 3 days with about 5 to 6 separate sittings, which I intend on showcasing. And I had to really dive into what those categories were going to be and why they mattered. And the first one I came up with was leader, and the leadership skills that the coach possesses, and that being always maintaining a cool image, always poised under control, the keeper of the vision, presenting the strategy, and also having confidence within how they deliver this vision on a day-to-day. Really just being that face, that authoritative figure, that just every essence of leading, and most importantly, being consistent and being a good, respectable man, being known in the community. I think that's very important. Second, being a winner. Winning isn't everything. It's the only thing. No, it's not. It's not. There's a lot of things, but at the end of the day, championships. How many championships do you have? Because they can't take that away from you. That's how your name goes in the rafters. And that's very important, is winning. I will dive into that in far greater depth. Being a culture creator, or almost like an innovator, I find that to be really important. That legend, like Coach K at Duke, he's one of those legends. Bobby Knight, where they almost build a whole school up. Dabo Sweeney now doing that at Clemson, where it's almost like they're like an old campus folktale. Bear Bryant, those are like those culture creators where the coach almost becomes the icon. And then the teacher, being able to teach their sport, their knowledge of sport, their ability of understanding the tactics, being able to coach a myriad of positions or wearing many hats amongst an organization. That's very valuable. How well do they know the sport, and them being an ultimate teacher of it? That's where the Bill Walshes, the Bill Belichicks, the Vince Lombardis, that's where those guys come from. Whereas like the Phil Jackson can tap into what you bring to the table as a human. So those were the 4 traits that I dove into, and then I'm gonna go right into how did this list pan out. So I'm gonna name right now my 6 through 10, and you're gonna see some of my processes as to how I establish who 6 with 10 would be, and then we're obviously gonna go from 5 down to 1. Starting at number 6. Who I have at number 6 was actually Mike Krzyzewski from Duke.
It's the beginning of the race. You have to push each other, 5 guys playing as one, what we've said about being a fist all the time. We're starting a journey. Where do we want to end? We want to end in April, and we want to be on a stage and we want to be accepting a national championship trophy.
The West Point grad who actually played under Bobby Knight at West Point. Bobby Knight was, I believe, an assistant. I don't think he was the head coach yet. But Mike Krzyzewski came up under him, cut his teeth a little bit. I believe he was also an Army officer. So those leadership skills bled over. And Mike Krzyzewski, to me, is just like a fundamentalist. A guy that does things right, very to the point, very direct, impeccable communicator, and just tough. Takes no shit. One of his disciples, Jay Billis, who is one of my absolute favorite personalities in all of sports and media, played for Mike Krzyzewski. He wrote a book called Toughness, and all his lessons were just that affiliation that he had playing for Mike Krzyzewski. And all those guys, Duke gets the smartest kids in the country, the cream of the crop that come from the elite families, and those guys go there and they play tough. And so that's just all around that culture. And then Mike Krzyzewski's ability he's won championships in every decade, at least I know since I've been alive. And he's been there for so long, obviously him just retiring, but his ability to then adapt to the one and done, very impressive. And then having a handful of guys going in the top 5, guys that weren't traditional Duke guys, moving with the times, from Brandon Ingram, Zion Williamson, to R.J. Barrett, Trey Jones, Jahlil Okafor. I think Jahlil Okafor in that class with Quinn Cook, those guys were the ones that really set the stage. The Duke starting 5 with the little haircut. Justice Winslow. And yeah, Duke really transformed into what a Duke guy was. Jabari Parker, Austin Rivers, Seth Curry. Oh my God. That's just in the last decade. Holy shit. Just really think about the legacy that Duke had prior to that. Mike Krzyzewski goes without saying, but I love the militaristic approach to the sport. Consistency, staying at one place forever, coached the Olympics, won gold medals, and never really sniffed out the pros. And if Kobe Bryant were to have gone to college, he would have gone to Duke. So I think, need I say more? That's Mike Krzyzewski's ability to really tap in high achievers and know how to get the best out of them. Getting a little crazy out there. Number 7, I had Pat Summitt.
My motivation is working with young people and going back to trying to help them be successful. I don't have to coach another day of my life. I don't have to win another game. I don't have anything that I feel like, hey, I've got to prove this. I've got to stay in the game and prove this. I love working with these young women and helping them strive to be the best they can be.
Pat Summitt was the all-time leading winner in NCAA history. That record's since been broken. Won 8 national championships, a gold medal as well. Was pretty dominant for about 3 to 4 decades. And where all those things are great, just being a woman in sport and being such an influential figure, she commands respect. I once one time was watching just her giving directions of playing defense in the low post, and watching her give directions for the drill almost moved me to tears. When you're passionate about a craft and you watch someone do it at a really high level, just watching her weigh with words, just being in her presence, she just demanded excellence. There's a level of intensity that comes around in human beings ever so often, and she just has this fire. God rest her soul, Pat Summitt. She's revolutionary in what she did for just the game of basketball, and most certainly with the women's sport. And I would love to see another woman coach really be as influential. Now, Becky Hammon has broken through the reins a little bit, but Pat Summitt has an energy and a level of authority, and the way she can just articulate herself, I don't think I've seen very few people ever like that. As someone who studies iconic figures, Pat Summitt is cream of the crop. Number 8 is Vince Lombardi.
Vince Lombardi is a name synonymous with pro football.
What we're trying to get is a seal here and a seal here and try to run this play in the alley.
In the 1960s, he built the Green Bay Packers into one of the game's most celebrated dynasties. His teams won the first 2 Super Bowls, and after his death in 1970, the championship trophy was named in his honor.
Super Bowl trophies named after him. Won Super Bowls 1 and 2 with the Green Bay Packers. A lot of people don't know the New York Giants won a couple NFL championships. He was an offensive coordinator on that team. Tom Landry was actually the defensive coordinator. Funny because they happen to be the 2 best coaches in football for decades following. But when Vince Lombardi took over, the Packers were in a very small market. People didn't want to go out there, really unique assemblance of players. And he came in there with his background, being an Italian from New York, incredibly tough, had military roots, was also an educator. He had waited a long time to be a head coach, so when he got to Green Bay, that's where he really got to see his vision through, bring it to life. And the Packers were phenomenal. There's a lot of stories about every guy that played on that team and how much they valued diversity and how much Vince Lombardi said that race was not going to be an issue here, forcing guys to room, integrating who rooms together, and making sure that those guys developed as men. I was fortunate enough when I was at Salisbury University in Maryland to do an after-school program with the guy who played for Vince Lombardi. I forget his name. Kills me. Got to be sharper. And just the way that he would talk about Vince Lombardi, being young enough to the point where I can come across someone at this point in my life, and for them to have crossed paths with Vince Lombardi and then discuss that experience. Wow, Vince Lombardi left an impact on this man, let's just say that. And that's when you know someone's special, is they can start leaving that little nugget and that little impact in the nature of someone's spirit. And so Vince Lombardi had the success on the field, had concepts like the Packers sweep and plays and philosophies that were incredibly simplistic because he understood how to teach people and how they process information. And he has just an iconic figure. He's also a storyteller and a motivator. And those are all things that really, he's just the total package. I think from 1990 to 1960, when I think about what a coach meant in America, Vince Lombardi very much embodies that. And a lot of these concepts have passed his time, but as we pay tribute to history, and we talk about some of the best to ever do it. And the fact of the matter is that the Super Bowl trophy is still named after him, although probably one day it won't be. He is definitely one of the pioneers of the evolution of the game of football and must pay dues to a guy that was able to leave their mark on not just the game, but so many people amongst it. Number 9 was Nick Saban.
You have to do is you have to have toughness. You got to be tougher than everybody that we play. I've never stood up here in all the time that I've been here and ever really defined toughness for you. The way I'm going to define toughness to you, because I'm talking about mental toughness, and I think everybody can relate to it, is it's all about what does it take to break you.
He could have been a little higher. I'm not going to lie. He's dominated college football for the last going on, it's going to be 3-4 decades now. My goodness. But Alabama, let's think about this. There's no pro sports team there. The boosters have a ton of money. He's basically God. He has full autonomy, and he's an NFL coach. All his schemes are incredibly sophisticated. His usage of personnel, his play packaging, his influence is so strong that he can go and find the best offensive coordinator. Now, he does develop coaches. Kirby Smart is phenomenal, and he's just as Georgia's right underneath Alabama now. Dabble, McDaniels, those guys were GAs under Nick Saban. Lane Kiffin, those are the first to come. The coach over at University of Maryland, Franklin, he's another one. There's a lot of coaches. Nick Saban has a pretty extensive tree. Pruitt at Tennessee. I think Pruitt was already canned. These coaches. Oh my God, it's funny that I think about that. But Nick Saban, the reason why I'm not going to put him higher is because he's an NFL coach. And for a guy like him to get his taste with the Dolphins, and his Dolphins failure is way overblown. He inherited the team after the Ricky Williams retirement, and there was just a lot of chaos. And ran his 3-4, and Jason Taylor actually had a monstrous year in Nick Saban's system. I don't think Nick Saban drafted bad players, and he beat the Patriots a couple times when they were heads up. If he signs Drew Brees as opposed to Dante Culpepper, that goes entirely different. And so he won the Natty at LSU. Boom, point proven. Still fairly young, has the vigor, goes to the Dolphins. I think he does about 3 years, can leave. And he didn't leave in that Bobby Petrino fashion. I think he saw the year through, although there was speculations that he was looking at the Alabama job. But he just really dominated the Alabama job. And it's almost not even fair because he's created this monopoly in college football. And so people are really tired of seeing Alabama run, but now it's just a system. And now he's getting really good offensive players. He's getting quarterbacks and receivers. Alabama's always gotten running backs. They've always gotten O-linemen. They've always gotten front seven guys. And when Nick Saban got there, they've had some great DBs. Now the system runs itself to where Alabama knows they got to score points in order to win, and they're just getting the best receivers and quarterbacks too. Mac Jones, Jalen Hurts, Tua Tagovailoa. Come on. They're all on the roster at the same time. They had 4 wide receivers get drafted in the first round. They're all on the roster at the same time. With all the backs that they had, Najee Harris coming out, he might be the best one. Now it's just kind of stupid. It's just getting ridiculous. I don't know. I think that there's an element of watching Nick Saban dominate to where I would have liked to see him coach back in the NFL. Even Urban Meyer, they had reverse paths, but Nick Saban, as a competitor, I know that greatness can never get boring, but there's another level to be conquered. Why did he never chase that? And so I can't quite comprehend that. Only he knows the answer. And there are elements to maybe where his wife calls those shots. And the NFL is very volatile. And if you're in control and you're making just as much money as an NFL coach and you love ball and he wants to ride out on his boat and he has the process, I get all that. But I'm just not going to put him up there with the big dogs because I think that he left some stuff on the table. And I said it before and I'll say it again. It's a really dangerous place to leave some stuff on the table. And so is Nick Saban just going to retire in 2 to 3 years, or is he going to coach till he's like 80 like Joe Pa? Nick Saban's a bad boy. Now, he definitely can coach until he's 80 like Joe Pa, but I'm just bored. I'm bored of seeing it. We get it. It's interesting that you can just get fatigued with someone's success. I think some people have that with LeBron James because they take it for granted. I'm not taking Nick Saban for granted. These are just other remarkable coaches, and I'm not putting him ahead of some of them if he hasn't dominated at every level. Sorry. In the last one, number 10, Tom Osborne.
I want to congratulate you on your retirement from active duty, that is. I want to thank you for what you've done for the young people you've coached and teaching them life and helping them to succeed and work through their problems and progress. As a fan, as a friend, as a fellow citizen, thank you from the bottom of our hearts.
I could be a little biased because I played for a school growing up that had the N on it and we looked like Nebraska. I could have a little bit of a subconscious bias, okay? But let me explain. Tom Osborne played in the NFL briefly. He had a cup of coffee, went back to Nebraska, got a PhD, goes from being an assistant coach to being the head coach, becomes an innovator with the triple option and the wishbone. He begins running that out of the power eye. I think they have the formation called like the Nebraska eye, and boom, the triple right down the midline. Then he mixed that with elements of the counter, and he had the counter tray with the reverse pivot. What's the play called? Might be a counter tray to the wing back. You can run a lot of different sets. You can use 2 tailbacks out of that triple option out of the eye. But that offense was deadly, and nobody had seen that. And he developed a handful of dual threat quarterbacks, and he was dominant for a very long time. And he walked away from the game on top. He won a national championship in his last year. Got little old Nebraska where there ain't nothing but cornfields competing with the big dogs. Playing the Penn States, playing the Miamis, playing the Oklahomas, created his system. Guy retires from football and becomes a state representative in Nebraska. And then when his term runs out, I'm trying to get all these political terms. I'm learning them still. I'm not crisp with them, but I'll get there. He then is the athletic director at Nebraska. I think he wore that hat a couple different times, but domination on every single level. Domination, innovation, sustained success. Didn't chase the pros, didn't do anything else. Legacy. But you can't knock the politics. So now you know beyond the football, the X's and O's, this guy's no joke. This guy understands what's going on amongst the people, amongst the public. And he cares, and he's a leader in his community, and then decided to wear that hat. Never left Nebraska. And he's also has a higher degree. And so he's just an intelligent guy. He values those things. Those are just rare traits for football coaches to have. All things considered, Nebraska hasn't quite been the same, but for everything that school is, I'd say that's the house that he obviously built. There's only about 3 to 5 coaches that can say that. And so there's a lot of layers to what you define as a coach. But Tom Osborne having success on all those scales, from being a teacher to creating culture and being an innovator to winning and being a leader, yeah. A lot of people don't talk about him. I'm not biased here. I think it's very difficult, all things considered, to have a top 10 list and not have a person that might not be elite in any of those respects, but all those things are the traits that every single person on this list has. That is from 6 to 10, and I am going to now think about this, ponder, go back to the drawing board, and figure out who is the greatest coach of all time. LeBron James might as well just be a coach. He's literally a coach on the basketball court. Can we count him? He's won championships with 3 teams. He's still playing. He's 37 years old. LeBron James is a damn coach. Who's your favorite coach of all time? LeBron James. Pat Riley got some serious consideration. And to some degree, you could put him over some people, but he's got championships as a player, as a coach, as an executive, multiple spots, committed to excellence, just almost like a sharp salesman. He just gets it done. Tough, gritty, committed on the defensive end. I got a lot of respect for Pat Riley. He definitely demands a spot on the wall. Top 10, tough, definitely outside of it. There's no way Tom Osborne is not getting on this list. PhD, congressman, innovator running the Power I, running the triple option out of the Power I, integrating gap run scheme with misdirection and triple. Come on. Won 3 natties as well. At Nebraska, John Gruden. Absolutely not. I can't even believe John Gruden became a broadcasting icon. I don't know. He's an animated motherfucker. He definitely is. But he won a Super Bowl with Tony Dungy's team and then never really got hot again in Tampa. And burned out and went to the booth. I respect him now. He's Al's child. Gotta respect that. But Pat Summitt, I don't care what anybody says. I think all things considered, she's definitely gotta make the list. Wooden is number 1. Wooden is definitely. Is he though? Yeah, easily. 10 national championships. Still ain't mentioned that. 90 consecutive wins. That's absurd. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar played UCLA. They were getting black players at a time when no one else was. Books. And the pyramid. It has been a journey in trying to establish who the greatest coach is of all time. I don't really want to rank them either. That wasn't in the plans. You come up with 10. First you came up with about 15. Then you condense that list. You think, does he make it? Does he not? Who's in? Who's out? Is there an extra? I wasn't even going to name the top 10. I was actually just going to focus on 5. And we might just post just the top 5. But it's there. We can review it at another time. And I think talking about 6 to 10 has just as much value. But jumping right into it. Number 5, Bill Walsh.
I can envision 11 men at one time, and I can still see them. But that was at the height of my career. I had a real feel for what everybody was doing. But I really enjoyed designing plays to beat defenses. But I also enjoyed the players themselves and the teasing. We had so much fun.
Bill Walsh is the creator of the West Coast offense, which is an element of an offense that almost every team in the NFL has parts of that offensive system within their scheme. Bill Walsh, I've talked about him a lot, but I found out that he only won 3 Super Bowls with the 49ers. He didn't win 4. George Seifert won 2 of those. But what Bill Walsh did was he developed the successor to his quarterback, who was a golden boy, with Joe Montana. Then he found Steve Young. We had receivers like Dwight Clark and John Taylor, and he was able to bring up Jerry Rice, constantly adding depth players like Ricky Waters. After Roger Craig, the system just continues to adapt, and wore the executive hat. He really just drove that organization even after he was done coaching there. Bill Walsh is a very influential figure, also really tried to increase the NFL's diversity amongst the coaches, understood that African-American coaches were underrepresented relative to the players, and he also partnered with Dr. Harry Edwards, a sports sociologist, to provide players with those resources, to understand what was going on off the field, to better reach them, to help them create better lives off the field. Bill Walsh also coached at Stanford a couple times, had a master's degree, wrote his dissertation on a football formation, the flank formation. Bill Walsh was obsessed with everything football, but he was also obsessed with the science, and that's why he always looked for different ways to implement things, and that's why long after he's gone, his work still lives on. And that's where I add him, is there's not many coaches that have articles in Harvard Business Review about how to run your organization. And that's a type of influence that from a football coach, when you can start tapping into the private sector to where corporate heads want to hear what you have to say, you're doing some things. Number 4 is Bill Belichick.
They're wondering about a timeout. He said, yeah, I got it.
I said, no, just play goal line.
And why Bill Belichick is number 4. First of all, within the remainder of this list, that actually makes him the highest ranking football coach. So I did pay my respect. And Bill Belichick is a football historian, and he has absolutely committed his life to the game. His dad was a coach at the a scout. His dad was a scout at the Naval Academy, and Bill Belichick really just grew up on the sidelines. He grew up, scratch that and. I said and. Start scratching out those ands, okay? Bill Belichick grew up on the sidelines and breaking down film with his dad, and then his dad's book breaks down different tendencies other teams may follow, things like special teams before the game and how their gunners line up in their stance, or if a guy has a front foot in his three-point stance and his weight's more towards the ball of his foot, what that might indicate. Really specific details, not only from just scheming, but preparation before the game, and then how to sort your information. And so no one's going to out-prepare Bill Belichick when these are his roots. And so Bill Belichick, one thing that you see is situational football. His team's always being ready for big moments. And Bill Belichick's management of his roster and getting the most out of all of his players. I don't think Bill Belichick is great with his relationships, but I think to some degree you have to be cold-blooded as a coach, very stoic, and understanding when to pull the cord on somebody. I think there is an element of care and compassion that you have to have for your players and them trusting you. You just saw right now, Bill Belichick has been behind Cam Newton for quite some time, then just cut him 3 days before the start of the regular season, just like he did to Lawyer Malloy. And Lawyer Malloy was the first guy that hugged him when he won the Super Bowl in 2001. He loved Lawyer Malloy. I think Bill Belichick was probably his coach when Lawyer Malloy was drafted in '96, and just was able to cut him just like that. And so that's how Bill Belichick, that's the one thing that he loses me, but he gives guys chances. Randy Moss, Corey Dillon, Chad Johnson, signed Tim Tebow. He'll give you a shot. He will most certainly give you a shot. And then they even draft guys with character issues. Doesn't concern him. Chad Jackson failed piss test. Didn't bother him. Brandon Spikes had a little bit of baggage. Didn't bother him. Let's remember now, Aaron Hernandez, we know how that story went. Bill Belichick drafted him. And so a lot of positive. I like coaches that create opportunities. Steve Kerr's like that as well. But Bill Belichick owns the football space. One thing I will say is that his success with the Browns, he had that 1 year, and then I think the Browns moving and his fallout with the owner is what set the stage for him to understand that having a good owner relationship is what he's going to need when he gives being a head coach another go. And going back to being a coordinator, knowing what he didn't know, learning under Bill Parcells, developing that relationship with Bob Kraft to then figure out what he's going to want for himself moving forward. Played it to absolute perfection, and that's why he got that job with the Patriots in 2000. that 5-11 year. Then right after that, here comes his golden boy, and they never look back. But one thing is that those first 3 Super Bowls, and let's not get this twisted, those were Bill Belichick's teams. So all those teams played in the same identity. Same with that Patriots team that beat the Rams in 2019. Jimmy Garoppolo could have quarterbacked that team. Jacoby Brissett could have quarterbacked the team. Tom Brady was falling off a little bit. Now, he didn't have weapons, and he did what he needed to do, but those were defensive run teams that played within the scheme, and they ran the ball. They out-physical people, and they made the plays that needed to be played, and the league was weak at those times. But Brady, after about 2011, emerged, and that's where it's hard to really analyze the Belichick legacy, because Tom Brady played a major role in where other quarterbacks had success in that system. Tom Brady went and won another Super Bowl right afterwards. In some of those Patriots teams, Tom Brady did carry. The Atlanta Super Bowl, the Seattle Super Bowl, that was Tom. That was certainly Tom. And the Philadelphia Super Bowl, which you can pin on Bill. No doubt about it. Tom Brady played one of the best games of his life. And so it makes Bill Belichick a little complicated. But I think that's okay. Undoubtedly, greatest football coach of all time. Number 3. My favorite number. And not only that, probably my favorite coach on this list, just because of my relatability to him, and that would be Phil Jackson.
Was driving home. I had a 40-mile drive from Albany to where I lived that time in Woodstock, New York. And I actually teared up driving down the road just thinking about the fact that how much I wanted this individual to succeed, and I wanted to help him succeed, and I couldn't do it. It wasn't about me, it was about him.
Manager of egos, first things first. He handled Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant, 2 of the most complex, maniacal winners of all time, who had issues with everyone else they were ever around that tried to coach them prior to. Michael Jordan went through a couple coaches. Kobe Bryant coached before Phil, a couple coaches after Phil. Phil comes back, saves him. Then after that, he has Byron Scott, who he's basically telling what to do in his later years. But Phil Jackson was the only guy that could really get it out of Kobe. And Michael Jordan, he got that whole organization to come together. In spite of Jerry Krause, Phil Jackson was able to really keep that organization together. And so in that documentary, The Last Dance, that through the midst of the 5 championships and that journey, from bringing in Dennis Rodman into the bunch to dealing with Michael Jordan and Scottie, the trade rumors, Michael Jordan leaving, coming back, Phil not getting his extension, not getting his respect, him and Krause butting heads over taking the credit, where something had to give to where they were able to stick it together and string that final one out. 2 3-peats. And then he manages Kobe and Shaq. Now, Shaq was an easy fix, just like when Shaq won with Pat Riley, but he made it work in the support that he had within the rest of that roster. But the triangle offense, he had his innovative scheme, which you can't, that scheme is really, that was the blueprint, that was the guideline, the playbook for Mike and Kobe. And that's what allowed Kobe to dissect the game and understand it on such a higher level. And the triangle has spiritual components, mathematical principles. That's deep. And so Phil Jackson was able to merge this spiritual element of even how he'd have his team do meditations together, implementing yoga into their daily routines, giving guys books when they were at weird junctures in their life and they just needed some support. He said, hey, I think I have a book for you. That's what a coach is supposed to do. Phil Jackson covered that from all cylinders, and he made his guys better people, and he helped them understand themselves. Phil Jackson has this individualistic component to where he is a person, and he really ties in the human element into getting the most out of those around him. That's something that I've really tried to follow. When I broke free from coaching, I got this tattoo, Be You. And if you remain yourself, that's the easiest way to tap into getting people to perform. Number 2, Scotty Bowman.
I was playing in the playoffs for the junior Canadians, and I got hit over the head with a hockey stick and suffered a pretty bad injury. And in those days, players didn't wear helmets.
did not have any prior knowledge of him, which shame on me because I should know coaches from all sports. And I was looking at this with some like way too many football, basketball, or college sports. I got to find a coach that has really tapped into it from all different spheres and had sustainable success and was just dominant. And I knew there was a guy. And so let me tell you about Coach Bowman. Started off with the Blues and turned him over pretty quick, became a head coach at 34. From there, he goes to the Canadiens and wins 5 championships. From there, floats around the league. I think he goes to Ottawa, goes to Pittsburgh as an executive, wins a cup as an executive. Then their coach dies. Then in 92, he wins it as a head coach, puts him at 7 rings. He then goes on to win, I think, 4 more rings in Detroit, in that Detroit dynasty. And then he's won another 4 rings with the Blackhawks as an executive. I could have some of those numbers up, but he has 14 rings. 9 as a coach and 5 as an executive. That is absurd with 4 different organizations. One thing that I read in studying about him was that the NHL Hall of Fame has what they call builders. So you can get in the NHL Hall of Fame as a guy that really just dedicates their life to the sport, plays a role in the evolution of the game, whether that be globally, strategy, or just the evolution of the rules, and a guy that was a winner within the sport. That's really interesting. I wish sports looked at that more holistically. I would love to have more of an impact in the game of football without maybe directly working for a franchise, a college, or like a youth team, and just really facilitating efforts to create more structure and standardization. I think other sports should look to replicate that. So that was fascinating for a guy like him to be in the Hall of Fame as a builder, and that the NHL even has builders. That is pretty freaking sweet. But Coach Bowman is definitely, he embodies all of these things from being a teacher, creating culture, winning everywhere he goes, and being able to climb the ranks as an executive. I would actually say that legacy from a guy who coached at the professional level, that is second to none. If I were to ever want to get into football coaching, that's how I would want my legacy to look, is all over the place, wearing all these different hats and winning championships with different teams. Doesn't matter the organization. I am the system. Respect that one. So that was, I'm happy to found Bowman diving into my bag. And then lastly is Coach Wooden, Coach John Wooden.
And if you don't have peace with yourself, I don't think you have much of anything. Reputation is what you're perceived to be, and that can be good or bad. But the character, you're the only one that really knows that.
He says the right thing, and he's so fundamental. It's almost elementary in some of his quotes. They're beyond inspiring. He was a writer, and he was really a wizard. And he created the pyramid success, and I don't necessarily know the quote exactly, but what winning is the personal satisfaction of knowing that you gave it your absolute best. That is where the true glory is found, and it's participation. It's participating in the sport and giving it your best. Getting away from the reward, getting away from the trophies. If you focus on what you need to do, pay attention to detail, and you're consistent, good things are going to happen. He was the ultimate teacher of life. He won 10 national championships. He had 4 undefeated seasons. He spent his lifetime in Westwood. He was married to the same woman till death did them part. And that pyramid of success became a staple in organizations throughout the world, regardless of industry, and how they would govern their organization. There's not enough things I can say about John Wooden, but when I literally look at John Wooden as the embodiment of my good conscience and his ability to develop some amazing people, all his players were successful off the court. He won in everything that he did, and he always gave back to the game, and he put education first. That's what a coach is. And so those long tenured college coaches that had exaggerated runs of brilliance, I find that when we define a coach, that's that little sweet spot is at the collegiate level, because the main thing remains the main thing, and that's the development of people. That's the hat that I find coaches to wear. I think that John Wooden is the consensus greatest coach of all time. He wrote a book called They Call Me Coach, and he's such an inspiration in me that I can take some of his ideologies and apply them and still be coach without leading a sports team. And so John Wooden is perhaps my greatest influence, and his pyramid of success is something that I would like to replicate in my companies as I continue to evolve. Coaching is my craft. It's something that I study extensively, and it's allowed me to also study corporate execs and my great admiration for Steve Jobs. And this is a project that I'll probably always be shuffling the deck the rest of my life. I look forward to continuing to analyze the rise of some new coaches. And the last thing I'm going to cover in this segment, I'm fascinated to see how this segment unfolds because I've shared so much information about how I feel coaching, the things that I value, especially as how it can impact different elements of business and different elements of sport in the individual that is playing in one of the two. And where do coaches go from here? What is the future of coaching? Couple things that I really like a lot. I talk a lot about Sean McVay in my Systems Chalk Talk, a young coach that the Rams have taken on a lot of personalities. They've traded a lot of their draft picks, and he has taken all the responsibility. You never hear a peep of any trouble, any sort of off the field issues with his guys. He runs a tight ship, and he's a young guy, so that is very respectable. Steve Kerr has been that young guy that was a player that is just one of the guys, and him and Draymond Green go at it like they're friends. That's the fact that he was a player, so he understands the culture. Mike Vrabel, same thing in football. A lot of the former Patriots are becoming coaches now, but Mike Vrabel's a guy that just knows the way the league is run, knows the culture, knows the politics. He can just get those guys to rally behind him. I think that is dope. Mike Vrabel's doing some really good stuff. And then Steve Nash. I think if you were to run this back, if I were a kid in like 2013, you'd be like, hey, Kevin Durant, James Harden, and Kyrie Irving are going to be on the same team together. You're going to have Blake Griffin there too. And they're going to be coached by Steve Nash. That sounds like something to be in a movie or something in a video game. That's like comical. Now that's actual real life. Steve Nash, really good communicator. And he's a lot of self-awareness, and he's solely there because of his player relationships, his player relations, if you will. He was working with KD when he was in Golden State, learned under Steve Nash, was a consultant for the Warriors. He played under Mike D'Antoni, so he understands this free-flowing new style of basketball. Steve Nash totally has the temperament, very progressive guy, and a guy that I could absolutely see being a very successful coach for a really long time. Interested to see how Chauncey Billups does down the road here. This guy at the Celtics, I can't pronounce his name, but he's a former NBA player that is fairly young that really can penetrate in that locker room with those young guys. He might be able to get them to rise. And then I think a dark horse to be an NBA coach sooner than expected, but I know for a fact that this guy wants to be an NBA head coach, and that's Chris Brickley, the basketball trainer. And when you reach a pinnacle and you're influencing a whole bunch of players and you have gotten all this, he would be the brand. I think he could potentially be the coach that rebrands the Knicks, and all his relationships with players could get them to play. He gets a couple guys to run X's and O's. That would be a branding juggernaut. That would be the total intersection of culture and sport to where like their guy was actually leading the team. That would be a major breakthrough. And you've seen basketball execs kind of supersede the industry, where guys like Penny Hardaway, minimal coaching experience, really much of anything, become a head coach off rip. Chauncey Billups goes right from being an ESPN analyst to now being a head coach, where the NBA owners value these former players. I think Rajon Rondo will also be another coach. But player perspective and branding, modern times, social media, fan appeal, these things all play a role. I don't know how far away the NFL is from this, but football coaches are boring. They wouldn't dare to think different. Basketball coaches, they can really crack the code here, and I think that'd be really cool to see a coach covered in tattoos. So that's where I think the future of coaching is going, and it's really exciting to see. Or maybe one of these sports leagues will get broken up. That'd be interesting to see as well. Now I'm just daydreaming. But no, this is an interesting body of work. And summing things up, that is what a coach means to me. That's my future outlook of what coaching could look like as it adapts with the times. And I am beyond excited, and who knows if maybe I'll ever return to the sideline. Right now, I got some pretty big responsibilities ahead of me, so I'm just going to focus on that. But at the end of the day, I'm still coach. That's all I got. Win the day.